I'm sure we've said it on the podcast, completely dud. The guy must be useless.
I just don't think that a team like Celtic can afford to carry a guy who can't get about the pitch.
And it's not happening for him at all, and just seems to be balls bouncing off him.
Daizen Maeda threw on goal,
swinging crosses wildly out for a throw in the other side. Yeah.
A lot of Celtic's iconic goals are him miskicking the ball and then KYOGO tapping it in.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Can Daizen Maeda smash Leigh Griffiths' record? That's what we're discussing this week on 20-Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie, joined by Melly.
Yes.
Stephen.
Good to be back.
Well, fantastic to be back if you're Daizen Maeda. It was a couple of weeks without Celtic. Obviously, we had that awful result, and then Celtic needed to go back to winning ways. And Daizen just reminded us what an absolutely smashing footballer he is.
Yeah, it's been quite the season for him, hasn't it? And quite the run as well. You think back to, he's basically barely stopped scoring all season, but ever since the turn of the year, he's got 17 goals in 17 appearances. And that's even while KYOGO was still here. So it's even later than that. He was eventually shifted into a central striking role. Yeah, exactly. So it's an incredible scoring run. 30 goals now. And the name you've just cited there's not many players in the post-Henrik Larsson era, so the last 20 years, who have actually reached 30 goals in a season. It's actually something of a rarity. There are 6. Can you name them?
Right,
can you name them? Yeah.
Edward.
No. So it's including Daizen. Dembele's one, definitely.
Dembele,
yes.
and Griffiths is obviously one.
3, yes.
Hooper.
Hooper, yep, correct.
Skiz McDiz.
Skiz McDiz. I'm assuming you mean Scott McDonald. So that's 5. You've got one more to get. It's possibly the hardest one. People will be screaming.
It's not Tony Stokes, is it?
No,
Big boy, not. Chris Commons.
It's Chris Commons.
That's right, in his first season.
Amazing to think back that he got 30 goals in a single season for Celtic.
It must have been his first season, because did he not? He had a good one, then an awful one, and then a fat one.
Well, he signed in January, so it wouldn't have been it might have been his first full season then, possibly.
It must have been
30 odd goals from a not quite midfielder, not quite winger. Who knows what he was? He was a Chris Commons, is what he was.
Do you know what's quite funny about Chris Commons? He's one of those players that sort of is between two eras, because he's very much the Neil Lennon player that we all remember.
Yes,
but also when Brendan Rodgers first arrived, remember there was like a weird clamour to have Chris Commons.
Was he 9 goals short of 100 for Celtic? And
there was a clamour for him to get played. And did he not bring him out?
The very last game of the season, he came on in his suit, didn't he?
The clamour of which you speak, I think, is people wanted to give him a send-off. People wanted him to play one final game before he went, but I don't think he played at all in Brendan Rodgers' first season.
No wonder.
Yes, exactly. We're trying to go invincible here. You want him in the team?
Prefers fit players, does Brendan? Yeah.
Throw it all away. Listen, well, he's got a fit player in Daizen Maeda. I was sort of watching Daizen Maeda during the game, and I think this guy's just on it. He's looking like a player who's at the absolute top of his game. And then after the game, he comes out and says, I'm going to score a hat-trick in my next game. That's what he basically said. He promised us a hat-trick, and I trust Daizen Maeda with my life. And I thought to myself, well, that leaves Melly 7 goals in 7 games to hit 40. And the form this guy's in, how sharp he looked coming off the back of an international break, his movement in the game was unbelievable. I think it's not out of the question that he can hit 40 goals this season. In fact, if he doesn't hit 40 goals this season, Melly.
It's well possible. It's getting towards that part of the season where you start to look at these things and go, and then you think, well, it's quite a lot. But all it takes is one smashing game, and you're looking at him now, and he's getting chances aplenty as well, isn't he? He seems to be on the end of everything, and everything Celtic do ends up at him somehow. Even the goal he didn't score, he hit the post and it fell to Jota. So he's been in sensational form. You wouldn't back against it. The only worry with that is if Celtic do get the league sewn up, you know what it's like after that.
That's sometimes a cup semi-final, potentially a cup final
so
to play in.
A couple of extra games in there as well. So he's absolutely on fire there now. And do you see him continuing that, or do you see that dropping off? And I can only say probably continuing that, judging by the way he's playing.
The thing about the Daizen versus the Griffiths comparison, and there's plenty of players you can compare Daizen to, but for the purpose of this podcast, we're doing it against Griffiths.
Right, imagine,
very similar.
Imagine
same hairline. Actually, Daizen's got a much better hairline than Griffiths. Though.
Somebody looking at Leigh Griffiths in his last season at Celtic and going, here, by the way, this job does the same guy as this guy Daizen Maeda. We were talking about it at the match. Like the difference in these two athletes that play the same sport is incredible.
I know Leigh Griffiths is not the sort of most coveted Celtic player, but we don't. I want to talk about Daizen without diminishing what Griffiths did that season, because it was absolutely ridiculous.
And a terrible team as well.
And a terrible team, and also was that the same season he scored those 2 goals for Scotland?
Just at the end of that season.
Yeah. I mean, it was the season of Leigh Griffiths' life, and no one can take that away from him.
No,
except as we're going to try.
Except Daizen might decide to take it away from him. That might be the defining factor, whether Daizen decides to score 40 or not, because he's already, as you said, decided to score a hat trick in the very next game.
What was KYOGO's best then?
34. So he could easily beat that. And I know we're just sort of largely throwing
he's
about.
Going to beat that.
Yeah, I think he'll beat 34, but that we're throwing around sort of arbitrary numbers. 40 this, 34 this, but even if Daizen doesn't reach 40 for whatever reason, he's still turned in one of the best individual seasons of any Celtic player that in living memory. And then that's like, as I say, you go back to the post-Larson era, which is 20 years now. This could be the second best goal-scoring season from anyone behind Leigh Griffiths, even if he doesn't get to 40. I mean, it could do it. It could manage it if things fall his way. But even if he doesn't, what you also need to take into account is, and as I said there, we're throwing around numbers, but it doesn't take into the full context, into account the full context of it. He's got 4 Champions League goals, which is more than anyone else has scored.
How many against Rangers?
Yeah,
as well?
1 goals against Rangers as well. And look, people will maybe scoff at that, but they are among the best, opposition. They're a top 10 opposition that we'll play in any given season. So he's got goals against them. He's got goals in the Champions League. 4 is one of the best single campaign returns of anyone as well. It's been a remarkable season from Daizen Maeda. So even if he doesn't get to 40, that shouldn't be seen as any kind of failure, or you haven't managed to meet that basically once in a lifetime
that's
season
the
from Leigh
benchmark,
Griffiths.
is it? But it's the one that sticks in the memory, and it's the one that a lot of people hold dear, that 40 goals a season. For obvious reasons. I mean, we're poking a bit of fun at it, but it's a ridiculous return. Is he better than KYOGO, Melly?
Yeah, potentially. We'll see how we get on towards the end of the season, but looking at his season...
That was a non-answer, wasn't it, Stephen?
Well, there's still
For you,
time.
do you think, I mean, having watched them both, I think there was a time even earlier on in the season where comparing these two guys as strikers wasn't even a conversation worth having. Right now, sitting here as we are, it is a conversation worth having. Who is the better striker? Is it KYOGO or is it Daizen?
Yeah, I think earlier this season we spoke about a sort of striker problem for Celtic, that where strikers weren't scoring. Now, the wingers were scoring plenty of goals either side of the striker, but KYOGO, Adamida went on a 12-game or something run without scoring. And you're looking, is it maybe a striker problem? But now we've put Daizen Maeda through there. Doesn't seem to be that striker problem. He is getting on the end of things, and he's also a lot more involved with KYOGO than KYOGO was. So I'm starting to look at it and go, possibly it was. KYOGO has got those individual moments of brilliance that I don't think anybody else in the team could maybe score some goals. Daizen Maeda's all-round game, it might very well be up there, if not better.
This season, Daizen has scored more goals in this single season than in his previous 2.5 combined. So while he is a long way off getting to KYOGO's overall goal scoring record, well, not maybe not in terms of number. I think that's Daizen get 59 and I think KYOGO finished on 85, so he's still a good bit behind. So it's a small sample size that we're dealing with as a central striker when you can compare them like for like. You're really only dealing with February to now April, which is ridiculous. Now we're talking about him potentially being a better all-round striker than KYOGO. So I'm cautious on that just yet. I'm kind of keeping my powder dry on that, and we'll see if that remains to be seen. Well, if it remains the case next season that he is still our number one central striker, because there's something we can maybe get into, but Brendan Rodgers' chat over it has been a bit odd at times, like talking about not being reluctant to play him
That's on
there.
the agenda for sure.
Yeah, so, but look, the fact that we're even talking about this guy as being alongside someone we all agreed was, to all intents and purposes, the best striker we've had since Henrik Larsson left us that 20 years ago. The fact that he has come from being seen as a bit of a, at times, blunt instrument, albeit energetic winger with flaws to his game, as basically the all-round striker in a matter of 2 months is an absolutely remarkable turnaround.
This is what I'm so perplexed by, because sometimes as we're sitting and we're watching and I'm listening to you guys talking about this, Daizen Maeda is a revelation. He's been a revelation at centre forward. But part of me is also like, maybe he's not been a revelation. Maybe this is what Daizen Maeda was always capable of bringing to Celtic, but he was just chosen to play out to accommodate another fantastic striker, trying to get the KYOGO through the middle. And it comes back to that conversation that Brendan Rodgers made the point in January. He was looking for a striker. Now, I understand that the manager's trying to achieve certain things with his team, and we're going to talk a wee bit about Brendan Rodgers' selections lately and players who are playing and omitted and all that. So I get that the manager will have an idea and a plan that's not immediately obvious to us. But one thing that was asked of Brendan Rodgers in the January window, that period where we were frantically trying to sign a striker, was, would you play Daizen through the middle? Can you play Daizen through the middle? And Brendan Rodgers' answer to that left me feeling like he was saying, I could, but I don't really want to. I'd rather go out and sign a striker. But I just don't see any way on earth, one, that Brendan Rodgers never knew how good Daizen was. Maybe he surprised them. And two, we were never signing a striker this good in January. Never in a million years were we going to pick up a striker in January that was as good as Daizen is now. So I'm left perplexed, Melly, by that comment about not wanting to play him through the middle.
Yeah, sometimes it happens in football, doesn't it? If we had went back to January and we were probably saying, no, we need a striker. Aye, we can play Daizen there, but it's not ideal. I don't think any of us had the foresight that he was going to go on this sort of run. Look, he was banging in goals at the time, but it was over on the wing. And taking him away from the wing takes so much away from that. I'm still not sure if a striker is his best position over out wide because he offers so much. But
it's easy to forget that because of how good he's been as central striker. 30 goals, probably around 60% of those goals came off the left, the vast majority anyway.
And it would have been interesting to see if he had played the full season out in the left, what he could have done, because he would have surpassed Scott Sinclair's best playing out there as well. So, and he's still revered for that season there. So I don't know. It just sometimes in football you move players or you move position and it just works out. It doesn't mean to say the manager never seen it or anything like that. It's just I don't know if anybody had seen this form here, but that is helped by the fact that Daizen Maeda's put through the middle, but you've also added in Jota there.
Yeah.
So the speed that the three of these guys have, if KYOGO had left and Daizen comes in and it was somebody apart from, like, if we had brought somebody in who took like the time Nicholas Kuhn did this time last year and it didn't work out, Daizen Maeda wouldn't be getting the goals. But you brought in Jota, him, Kuhn and Maeda have the pace up there that devastates teams. And as well, Maeda as well, he's been that guy that we've been on here a lot of times this season going, that's another goal taken off his tally because of daft refereeing decisions. There was one at St Johnstone, there was the penalty goal he should have had for Park as well. I'm sure there's been another one where he's had a goal disallowed that Willie Collins came out and apologised for as well, so he could have had much more. I'm still no, time will tell, but I'm still not sure if out through the middle's his best position or out left.
Sorry, we not finished.
He's dynamiting both.
Right, okay. The one thing I've noticed about Daizen, Stephen, and it had me thinking about this Brendan comment was we used to make a joke in the podcast about Daizen shit. And Daizen shit is Daizen Maeda threw on goal.
Swinging crosses wildly out for a throw in the other side,
Because a lot of Celtic's iconic goals are him miskicking the ball and then KYOGO tapping it in.
But he's really sharpened his technique. He's almost got rid of all that. Some of the finishing we've seen from Daizen, even in the Hearts game, the first goal, the wee run off the shoulder and the finish around Craig Gordon, that was like peak Gary Hooper. Like that's really some wonderful technical finishing, first touch looking great, movement looking absolutely sharp, and you think to yourself, it's not just a case of Daizen's moved from the left into the centre and we're getting the exact same Daizen. There's definitely been an uptick, there's been an improvement from the guy.
And certainly in terms of consistency, because it was always there. He always was capable of scoring cracking goals, maybe not quite the stereotypical poachers or finishers or strikers instinct goals that you see now, like that goal, that his first goal at the weekend being a prime example of that. But he was always capable. Every time we talk about Daizen and his, previously people kind of laughed at his technique. I picture that goal he scored at Easter Road where he just sort of cut inside and bent it into the top corner. He's always been capable of scoring cracking goals. Yeah, that's right. But he's had a few of those as well. He had about 3 or 4 red cards in his time.
He's not been sent off more times in Europe than any other Celtic player, something like that.
I've been beat on.
It's brilliant stuff. It's just about everything. Just never a dull moment.
I welcome all of it. I'm happy to take it all.
And that's another aspect of when comparing him to Leigh Griffiths, and it's not about taking away from Leigh Griffiths, it's about sort of enhancing the achievement of Daizen Maeda this season. No penalties at all. Like, he hasn't taken a single penalty and still somehow got to 30 goals. Anyone else you compare him with will have scored a fair amount of penalties, at least probably 7 or 8, 9, 10 or whatever a season. He's not taken any, so it's been quite an incredible achievement. And it's just a case of getting him signed up. Now, I think Brendan Rodgers acknowledged that, and Brendan Rodgers also, see when you said about the the willingness to play him through the middle. He reiterated that after the most recent game where he was asked, well, is that now Daizen through the middle? Clearly, you'd be mad to move him from the middle. He paused for a second. Brendan mused for a couple of seconds, right? He paused. He did that thing where he kind of thinks, he considers his answer, and he said he can. So it was very similar stuff to what he was saying during the transfer window. So I think my perception of that is, I could be completely wrong, but there's been a lot of debate over whether, what was that guy talking about when he said Daizen can't play through the middle? My perception of that was something of a chess move from Brendan Rodgers. None of this like a message to the board thing. Nothing as blunt as that, where people like criticise or accuse managers of picking dodgy lineups so that the board will be sprung into action. I don't really believe any of that stuff. But
I do. Especially when it comes to Brendan Rodgers, genuinely, yeah.
But I suppose, I mean, this is part of my point. I think that when he was asked that originally, when he was asked that can Daizen play through the middle, bear in mind this is in the middle of a transfer window, I don't think he's going to sit there and say, do you know what? In fact, we don't need another player in.
There's a negotiation going on, isn't there?
Now that you've said that, do you know what? We'll probably just get by without a striker. You have to remember at that point, Brendan Rodgers was repeatedly, publicly talking about the desire to sign a striker. We're going to sign a striker at one point. We're close to signing a striker. Hopefully get something announced in the next 24, 48 hours. We'll take a loan and then nothing. So at any point during that, if he plays shows his hand and says, do you know what, Daizen can play there anyway, I think it was just a little bit of manoeuvring from Brendan Rodgers to not let them off the hook by saying, do you know what, he's publicly said he can play Daizen through the middle, no bother. So to me, it was less about saying Daizen can't play through the middle, rather than Brendan Rodgers saying, yes, he can, but my preference would be to strengthen the overall squad in that position.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out over the course of the rest of the season and in next season, whether Daizen continues through there. But the first goal you're talking about, Jamie, when that's the one I would probably previously worry about Daizen Maeda.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
He's put clean through and you go, this is where he struggles, because he is very instinctive. He'll be that guy that will be in the right place, right time. I can always picture like these dodgy goals he gets against Livingston at the back post where it hits off him and he goes in, and he's always getting into the positions where if you square it to him like the second goal he got, he's fine at that. It's when he's put through and he's got time to think about it, you worry. But that was a striker's finish, whether it be Hooper, Larson, whoever we want to do it.
It's on Swedward.
Yeah. Don't. That's the kind of finish.
Caught a few with that one, didn't it?
Still going. You'd expect him to maybe think about it and struggle, but if he's putting away those chances, it's brilliant. And we sort of, us and others, speculated when Brendan Rodgers came in, is Daizen Maeda going to be the type of player for him? And it didn't look too good at the start, and then he became a really important player. But we also said, look, Brendan Rodgers is more of a coach than Ange Postecoglou is. He'll be working and getting his coaches to work with Daizen Maeda and work on things. And I think you're starting to see that now, that coaching's coming into him, because he's always a guy that's willing to learn, I'd say, and he's doing that, and he's coming to the sort of peak of his career now as well, where he's been in Scotland a long time, and he's just looking like it's his time.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers, like, get what's that? I got Desmond on the phone. He referenced Desmond. Get the big bucks. He's earned every penny. Brendan Rodgers really pushing for that extra contact for things. I don't think there can be any disagreement. I mean, the guy is. When we lost KYOGO, part of the worry was that we've lost like an iconic Celtic player. We've lost an iconic Celtic sort of superstar that all the kids and all that could relate to. But Daizen has just stepped. He wasn't not in those shoes. He had his own shoes that were almost equally as good. But now he stepped directly into KYOGO's shoes, and everyone loves him. Yeah,
I think with KYOGO, it sort of felt like it was now or the summer, and he was going to go, and you maybe made peace with it. And Daizen stepped in and went, hold on a minute, we were creating all these problems. KYOGO's not getting the supply, or we're not playing to KYOGO's strengths. Yet we've played a guy kind of like him, and we're doing absolutely fine with it. Kind of that first goal, again referencing that, when the ball went through from Callum McGregor, if KYOGO's watching that, he's like, I make those runs all the time. I do think that players are looking for Daizen Maeda more than they were KYOGO. I don't know why that is, if it's intentional or what, but he's one of these guys that I'm looking at going, right, we've got everything there now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out over the course of the season.
Stephen, there's a sort of tale of two strikers at Celtic at the moment. Melly was saying before we recorded that he's a bit worried about Adam Maeda. I think he's going to have, I think in terms of Adam Maeda, if he was to assess the way his own season's going, he'll probably see this Daizen thing as a missed opportunity. I know we've touched on it again, but just referencing from the Hearts game, he doesn't look too hot now, is he?
No, he's been a bit of a moments player this season. I would describe IDAH as, or maybe even throughout his Celtic career. He's had big moments, notably against Rangers last season, especially in the cup final, and then Aston Villa was brilliant.
He was
this
excellent
season.
in that
game. Superb. So he's never really had a proper run of goals where he doesn't play consistently, but that's the problem with having a relatively strong squad, a good 4 players for 3 positions that you can play in that front 3. So he's found playing time relatively hard to come by and has got a decent amount of goals for that. It's just he doesn't look particularly great at the moment. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. And I did note as well that Brendan Rodgers, when asked about the striking positions and bringing strikers in and playing Daizen through the middle, he said that it would be easier in some ways to sign a top-class winger. It'd be easier to go out and source a top-class winger than it is to go out and get a top-class striker. If I'm Maeda, I'm thinking, spent 9 million on me, mate. So is that, what am I at the end of the day? So again, it's not really about the fee. It's just that he hasn't really lived up to the promise that he showed in these big moments that I've referenced earlier. So he's found himself in a difficult spot. It must have seemed like the road was clear as soon as KYOGO left, given that he is was the second choice striker. But the main striker, as you put it, Jimmy, the iconic striker goes, and he finds himself still very much in second place and a distant second behind Daizen Maeda. I can't really think. We spoke about this before the Rangers game, and I had said that it'd be very difficult to find any argument to play IDAH if it means moving Maeda from the middle.
Yeah.
Regardless of the permutations with Kun, Jota, and anything like that, I think taking Daizen out of the central position would take something special, and I don't think he does that. I don't think he's really done that so far. He's had his uses, and he has scored goals off the bench at times. And as I say, Aston Villa was an extraordinary performance. That was a brilliant striker's performance. But I wouldn't describe myself as worried about it, but it is. He will attract attention based on the fact that Celtic spent £9 million on him,
which is Celtic's fault. I mean, by all accounts, he was their £9 million player until we pissed about all window and went back for him.
Well, again, it's certainly no Ida's fault. None of it is Ida's fault. He's not in charge of the fee that was paid for him, and I think, you're right. I think that the lack of the negotiation to get in a buy-in fee at the end of the loan seems to have cost Celtic big money. I'm not too bothered about that, but in terms of the perception of him as a player, it will no doubt just follow him around, especially if he ends the season on whatever it is, 14, 15 goals for a £9 million striker in Scotland. It's not a great return, although there are mitigating circumstances to that.
It's good this, thinking back to when Adam Idah signed, and then January there and going, right, last January we scrimped and saved and got Adam Idah but didn't get a clause in, and then this summer we just, this January we didn't even bother getting him in. It's good.
Good.
But you said you're not worried about Adam Idah, Stephen. I really like Adam Idah. I thought he was going to be a good player. I even said earlier this season I thought he'd go on to take KYOGO's place towards the end of the season. I felt he had more uses in games and could deliver more. His all-round game, I didn't think he was a better player than KYOGO, but the last few games, seen his contribution, it's not happening for him at all, and just seems to be balls bouncing off him. And like you said, I don't know if it is a confidence thing, but it just seems like every time, whether it's the Aston Villa game, right, he'll go on a run now, or the young boys game, that's went in off his arse. That's the thing he's been waiting for. He scored for Ireland during the international break. That'll be him back.
He was shushing people during that. He said he saw a lot of stuff online, people criticising him.
It just doesn't seem to happen for him, does it? And it's a shame, because I don't think it's for a lack of effort. It's just not coming off for him.
That says to me, like, I always worry when players are criticised and they start paying attention to social media. I always worry about that, because I think, do you know what? You shouldn't care. Like, and it's easy. I know it's so easy for us to sit here and just say, I'll just turn off it, let's switch off from it. But when it gets to that level, I think, God, that to me does speak to a confidence thing, because he must be looking at it, he must be reading this and going and starting to believe it. Like, these people they've got a point, and
or else try to go out and prove them wrong, when really he should only be proving to himself what a kind of player he is. And you don't want him issuing shush buggers, do we? It's getting a bit.
Speaking of Todd Cantwell, he's been bombed it.
Oh, has he?
Oh,
that is a shame.
How many months did it take them?
I was reading just before we came on, he's something like played 3 games in the last 10. He's not getting picked. He's absolutely bombed out. 27 years old.
Imagine
told you.
Shock.
So all the chat about how he's found his level was incorrect respect as well.
Yeah.
He still seeks his level.
Yeah, he's going to need one of those submarines to help him find that.
What a shame. But hopefully Adam Maeda can...
One of those submarines.
As if they're just out there.
A submarine.
Let's go out and pick one up. Ida worried about him because I always think, right, that's the confidence boost he needs, but it just doesn't come. But also, this time last year when he was flying and making a big difference for Celtic, Celtic were struggling games and he was coming on and having to make a difference.
Playing with a purpose.
Yeah, well, this year when he came on at the weekend there, and look, that second half was a complete non-event. So he's probably working off scraps. Even if like we watched the highlights just to recap on it there, I think it's a shot from Callum McGregor that trickles into Craig Gordon's arms.
The highlights of the second half are laughable.
Is
like
the only thing, and with all the changes Celtic made, they changed 2 midfielders in the front 3 as well. You can see why it's a bit disjointed. Maybe if he got a run with Daizen and Jota on either side, or Kuhn when he was flying, but he had that and he wasn't even scoring the goals then. So hopefully it's just... Well, he said he needs another goal just to kick it off, but that's not done it so far.
We said that a while ago, didn't it? That he needed a goal, and he did get it, and it doesn't seem to have worked. You're right. When I say I'm not worried about him, you're right to sort of pick that up, because I'll quickly change my tune if it's costing Celtic.
Because Celtic are winning games,
that's
aren't
it.
they?
Yeah, I will quickly pivot on that if Celtic get a bad result as a result of it.
If you're watching this podcast and you enjoy it and you think I'd like to get more from those guys, I'd like to support what they do, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, you can do that on Substack, and you can do it on patreon.com/20minutetims. It's where you get extra podcasts, extra videos, extra writing from us. We like to put bonus stuff up there, and next week we have got a sit-down interview. He's coming in the studio with Kenny Miller. Apologies if you're if you've caught the podcast early on the 31st of March, which you can do on all those platforms for a small fee. Apologies if you're listening tomorrow on Tuesday, April 1st. That was an absolutely terrible April fool.
Douglas Ross pulled out.
Patreon.com/20minutetims is where you can support us. Brendan Rodgers' selections. I've got to admit, the guy's confusing me a little bit with his selections. And I know Brendan Rodgers has got a master grand plan of football that someone like me could never understand. But I do look at things like Kuhn having an absolutely abysmal performance and keeping his place for the Hearts game. Schlupp having a poor performance and keeping his place over Greg Taylor, who we'll probably talk about. Nawrocki coming in against Rangers, doing fine. And Trusty not getting his place back. And on the Nawrocki thing, I'm going... How did this guy not play ahead of Lagerbielke and Scales for such a long time?
Yeah.
There's probably a managerial thing that Brendan's trying to do there. So some of Brendan's team selections have confused me a wee bit, and I was honestly, how well Yang was coming on, maybe it was an international break thing, compared to how Kuhn finished the Rangers game, or didn't finish the Rangers game. I was surprised to see him keep his place there. I thought we would have sort of saw some of Yang.
Yeah, that probably comes into the IDAH chat as well. After the Derby game, I thought there's no way Kuhn can start the next game, because that we spoke about it, didn't we, after the game, that performance cannot be rewarded with that. There has to be consequences for a performance like that. But look, it might just be a bad game for him, but we've seen it before from him against them. So I thought, well, okay, if you don't bring in IDAH, would you maybe switch things about and bring in Yang? So yeah, it was a bit weird that Kuhn started, but I think he did play quite well, set up one of the goals, and looked a wee bit back to it, but it's not enough, is it? You can't just decide that I'll take the Rangers game off and come in. Nawrocki, it's a difficult one. I don't know how fit Trusty is, because he didn't make the game before the international break. He didn't go away with America, and he's back and he's on the bench. But quite harsh if you're going to drop Nawrocki after it. He was put in a game like that and didn't do anything wrong, did he? Yes, maybe his passing was off, but that's understandable being thrown in there. So I think it'd be a bit harsh for him to lose his place, but I didn't see anything from him that I thought, we've had a gem here the whole time. Hearts didn't pose that much of a threat, and I think there's that sort of left-sided defender balance where you're much better having a left footer who can go out that way, and it makes things easier. That's why Celtic were so right-hand side heavy against Rangers, because it kept going in over that side. So Nawrocki maybe didn't do enough to lose his place, but I'm not sure he's going to do enough to keep his place long term.
Nah, I think we would have found that out by now, surely. It's been almost 2 years.
That's what I'm confused about, because He's been bombed out to a level where you think he must be I'm sure we've said it on the podcast, complete dud. The guy must be useless.
In terms of a transfer, he is. I don't think him having played 2 games sort of negates the fact he is ostensibly an absolute dud of a transfer. If you paid 5 million, whatever it was, from a couple of years ago, and he's made maybe 13 or 14 appearances.
I suppose the question I'm posing is, having seen him against Hearts and having seen him against Rangers, are you surprised how his Celtic career has panned out compared to some of the absolute dross we've seen play ahead of him? Admittedly, Liam Scales can play on the left footer, and that comes back to, I suppose, what I was talking about managers having plans that we probably don't fully understand. He was probably prepared to forgo a bit of defensive ability, maybe, or a bit of quality, maybe, for a player who's left-footed and there's no much between the pair of them. But I'm sure, did we not see that guy for Liverpool play ahead of the
Nat Phillips?
Lagerbielke? Very strange.
Yeah, I know, I forgot about Nat
Phillips.
He
was injury-prone as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. How did he get in there? Nat Phillips, but I suppose you could break that down.
Winners' medal last year.
He did. That's right. I suppose you could break that down into 2 questions. Am I surprised that he's looked all right? No, but am I surprised that he has failed to establish himself? No, also no. I don't think it. I think it ultimately boils down with Nawrocki to the fact he's really slow. I think it will just always be that. I don't think something. I mean, I know famous last words. I nearly opened myself up to ridiculous hypocrisy there, because we're always criticising Celtic's transfers, but what I nearly said was something brought him to the club, right? Something stood out somewhere along the line that made Celtic sign him. But for whatever reason, he got in the door, and Brendan Rodgers decided there and then that he wasn't physically up to the challenge. And I don't mean that he's not big or strong or aggressive. There's maybe a little bit of that, the latter there. I don't know if he's really the most aggressive of defenders, but he looks painfully slow. And I just don't think that a team like Celtic can afford to carry a guy who can't get about the pitch as much. So
he was originally brought in. Did Brendan not say he was going to be the sort of third choice behind Carter Vickers and Starfelt, and then Starfelt left and Celtic had to change their plans? But if Starfelt leave, Starfelt and Carter Vickers have got a bit of pace about them. You don't want to bring in somebody painfully slow to be their understudy.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately it. I don't think he was ever a terrible footballer. I think they basically just brought him in, and the thing that looked quite good about Nawrocki originally was that he looked as if he was willing to take on forward passes, and it's not something we always see from our defenders, but I think it was just too slow to make it as a Celtic defender. How he got... I said it at the time. I described both him and the Lagerbielke as a complete and utter failure of recruitment.
It's weird, isn't it?
A complete and utter failure
to bring for the two of them as well.
To bring in 2 defenders who basically can't meet the minimum requirement of speed required of a Celtic defender.
I heard a rumour that I just don't believe it, because obviously when things don't go right at Celtic, rumours fly everywhere. And I heard a rumour that Celtic, the analytics tools that Celtic used, I'm sure if someone knows they might DM me here, but the analytics tools that Celtic use, you know how when you buy software, it's like got 3 tiers, and Celtic opted for like the second tier of analytics software that didn't have sprint metrics and pace and all these extra things. I just don't. I don't know why I'm repeating it on a very popular podcast, because even myself, I don't believe that. But there's maybe one party that does. There's 1% of me that's like, well, maybe if like the cheap one was $5,000 a month and the more expensive one was $10,000 a month, Celtic would, because it is such a weird transfer to commit so much money to a player, then to not see him and everyone go, this guy must be crap, and then you see him for 2 games and go, he's not crap, he's actually alright, he's just a bit slow.
Quite honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if we received a scouting report on Nawrocki via fax, and it had all the speed stuff on the back, and it said please turn over at the bottom. It said brilliant defending, brilliant heading, brilliant tackling, and then on the back it said but painfully slow. We've just put that down. Thought brilliant, sign him.
Get him signed immediately. Greg Taylor's gone.
Yeah, but it's sort of first confirmation that it seems likely that it's going to be that case. We've speculated a lot, and now that it's coming to that, it's just Brendan Rodgers says he wants game time. It's all about the game time, and with Kieran Tierney coming in, he's probably seen the writing on the wall. But with Kieran Tierney, you'd expect there would still be plenty of game time, but Greg Taylor's at an age where he wants to be playing. And look, Brendan Rodgers has been very complimentary of him, always has been. Just sort of the procession to leaving. Sorry to see you go, Greg.
I totally get it. I get Greg Taylor's position entirely. Greg Taylor has he's done well at Celtic. He's won a lot. He's established himself as a first team player. He played every single week for Celtic for years now, and he's won a treble with the club. And Celtic went out and they're spending a lot of money on a new left back, and it's pretty evident to everyone out with and in with Celtic that you're bringing in Kieran Tierney on mega money. He's obviously going to be first choice. I'm sure Greg Taylor's had these conversations with Brendan going, like, what's the plan next season? And Brendan said, like Melly said there, look, there's going to be plenty of minutes. We'll get you games. There'll be plenty of minutes. I want to change the way we play, and Kieran's bringing things to the game that you can't, but there'll be plenty of time. And honestly, if they've had the conversation and Greg's committed and done all he's done for Celtic and won all he's won, and he's at an age now and they've had that conversation, Stephen, he's more than within his rights to go, do you know what? Shake hands, thanks very much. And Brendan can shake Greg's hand, and we can all say, look, thanks very much, Greg. You did a great job when you were here. You've won plenty. And then he goes on to the next adventure.
He won your heart for a start.
I found myself as the sort of number one.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing he's going to take away.
Nobody can ever take that away from him. But I found myself as the number one Greg Taylor defender just because I thought, as I said a million times, boring myself with it now. He just got far too much stick than was warranted. He got far too much stick than was warranted, and I didn't think people really appreciated. It happens a lot in football, and I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes, like, a player comes and they're not very good, or you just don't like them. And it happened with Starfelt, who was a terrific defender, and quite often,
first impressions, isn't it?
You just carry that forever.
Yeah.
But what happened with Greg Taylor was he changed as a player, and he got better, and he matured, and he became a strong part of the Celtic dressing room, and all these different things happened. But people still remembered that wee guy we signed for Kilmarnock all those years ago. So I completely get Greg Taylor's position. I think he's well within his rights. He'll go away our thanks and praise, and I don't expect him to get any sort of warm farewell.
Open top bus.
Like somebody in our Discord was saying, like, we did all this for Joe Hart. Do you think we will do it for Greg Taylor? And the Joe Hart thing, it was kind of different, and I completely get why Greg Taylor should get something like that, because he's given a lot and he's won a lot. But there's some players who just don't capture the fans' like James Forrest has got basically nothing. Like, people just don't really capture the fans' imaginations in one way or another. But
pure personality, isn't it? I think some players. I think you're right. I think some players do.
Taylor's got personality, but
yeah, he does. But what I mean is, he hasn't formed a particularly strong bond with the fans in the way that Joe Hart did, and others do. Like even Aaron Moy.
You can't blame Greg Taylor for that. I'm not saying you are, but also I understand why he probably hasn't, because people used to give the guy pelters consistently.
It's not something you can necessarily put your finger on. It's just something that maybe happens just by pure.
Organically done.
It is. It just happens, and sometimes it's through personality and performance. Like Joe Hart was the kind of combination of both.
Laid it on real thick, Joe Hart, didn't he?
And Aaron Moy, as I said, like, for some reason, I mean, he was completely bereft of personality, but for some reason, everybody loved him. It just happens sometimes for whatever reason. And I wouldn't like to speculate on the reasons that it hasn't really happened for Greg Taylor, and to an extent James Forrest. But people always say, "Oh, James To the legend." To the majority of people, he is definitely that. But there's also people that, remember, there was so much debate over whether people were going to bother going to his testimonial and all that, and then he's never had a song. But it's not about James Forrest. But the Greg Taylor thing, I completely respect his decision to do that. And I think everyone should. Now, I'm not for a single second here sitting telling people that they should rate Greg Taylor or even like him as a player, as a person, or anything. That's entirely up to the individual. I'm not bothered about that. But when a player leaves for game time, I think people should just say, do you know what, that's absolutely fair enough. And do you know why? Because people do that the other way around.
Yes.
See when KYOGO leaves, see when Matt O'Reilly leaves, see when anyone leaves and they don't get a game at their next team, everyone is just like, see, you could have been playing this whole time, but you could have been here playing football, and really you went and challenged yourself. So why wouldn't players leave to go and play?
Do you know, I thought you were going to wheel out a thing you don't hear anymore, and it's stealing a wage.
Right.
You don't really get players accused of that anymore. They sort of sign on for big wages and they don't want to play.
If anything, Brendan's out there saying we're stealing money by not giving Daizen a wage rise. He's out there.
So the argument we make to players, or no, I'm talking about the sort of general we here, not literally us, but people say that it's about playing, it's about establishing yourself and all that, and then trophies and stuff like that come on top. That depends on your club. But then we're about to blame this guy for following the same path that we demand of players, that they want to stay in. Are
you calling us football fans fickle?
Never. I would never ever dream of it. But no, I think ultimately, if it's a football related decision, forget about all that boring stuff about wages and all that, right? If it's a football-related decision where he wants to spend the last however many seasons of his career, because he's 27, 28 now, it's not as if he's almost finished, but he is at that pivotal point now where he's kind of entering, or maybe has already entered his athletic peak.
Last big contract territory.
That's where I'm going with that. I think if it's about, I want to go and be the first choice left back somewhere, or if not automatic first choice, have a better chance of being first choice, and it's not being behind Kieran Tierney in the pecking order. I think that's absolutely fine. My perception, my take on Greg Taylor is that, again, I wouldn't dare sit here and say everyone should rate him because he's won trophy after trophy, all that. So that's not my point. But I think he was a key player for a treble-winning Celtic team, and that should buy you something. That should buy you some sort of perception and respect out there. Again, I'm not saying you have to like him, but where I draw the line is when people say I was never good enough, he was always piss, etc. I think you can disregard opinions like that, because if you watched Ange's second season and thought Greg Taylor was crap during it, I don't know what to say about it. But again, that's
I don't know what to tell you.
No, again, this is not me sitting here saying, oh, you don't get it, you don't understand ball and all that for not liking Greg Taylor. You're perfectly within your rights to have your own opinions on players. But I think that season he was excellent, and for that alone, for being a key part of a treble-winning Celtic team, that should afford you some sort of, whether it's a goodbye, not even just like waving to the guy on the way at the door. I'm not saying banners and fireworks.
A golden handshake, a carriage clock.
Stuff like that.
I think he'll get some sort of send-off in the last home game from whether it be Green Brigade, and I'm sure he'll get a wee lap of honour. And he deserves it, I'd say. But you can look back at his career, and he's probably has been... We have focused on his weaknesses, but his weaknesses aren't really something that he can change, is it? It's always been his height and the way football's going. It has become more physical, and he just can't do that. And you've seen there was a couple of runs by Jeffrey Schlupp at the weekend where he just cuts across people and takes about 2 or 3 players out, and Greg Taylor just can't do that. It's just the way it is. But I think with Taylor, we always focus on the negatives, and when he has done well, I think people have said, you know what, he is a good player, but it's just that since Kieran Tierney left, we've been trying to replace him. Greg Taylor's done that and beat off everybody that's tried to overtake him. And the only way we've got a replacement for Tierney is to bring Tierney back. And it shows how well Greg Taylor's Greg Taylor's done in between that. Because how many do you say he's chalked off now?
Oh, 4 or 5. He's beat off 4 or 5 and he's still on top.
Sometimes 2 at a time, because Laxalt and Bowling Goalie, they were here roughly about the same time. Beat both of them off at the same time.
That's fucking
multi-talented.
Ambidextrous. What sort of reception do you think Kieran Tierney's going to get? Listen, this isn't an opinion I hold, right? But see if you're one of these guys out on the internet that buys into the left before the 10 should have stayed for the 10 rat behaviour, and you can still find them like those Japanese World War II soldiers that are still on those islands. Kieran Tierney's your man. We brought him up for a wee boy. We brought him up and he left before the 10 for the Yankee dollar. So we'll see how the reception he gets.
There's a lot of chat around this sort of thing right now.
Sorry, that's not my opinion. That was a bit of a little joke.
That was a goof.
It was a goof.
There's a lot of chat about this sort of thing now because of Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving Liverpool and going to
they're taking a while,
Real Madrid, and he could stay here and be a legend. It's Real Madrid. There's probably no other team he'd leave for. So these things happen. He went to Arsenal. It's not panned out the way he probably wanted long term, but he's went to Arsenal. He's won a cup. He's went and played in Spain. He's had a good career. It's just injuries have forced him back, which was Celtic's fault for playing him so much.
When Greg Taylor ends up at Real Madrid, we're going to look like right mugs.
I think the fact that the fans outright disrespected Greg Taylor by singing Kieran Tierney's name a few weeks ago. Remember that? That tells you everything you need to know about Kieran Tierney's reception coming back.
Brendan taking himself awful seriously.
One of my favourite fan moments of the season after that was the game immediately following that. When Celtic, the Green Brigade went through all the repertoire singing songs about Lustig and Ambrose and whoever else that came off the top of the head. That was absolutely brilliant.
2 last things to bring up. Speaking of Joe Hart, I think a good thing about this sort of what sometimes catches the fans' imagination, what doesn't, is that connection. And you've got that way with Joe Hart and Kasper Schmeichel, who are basically facsimiles of each other. They're clones in terms of career and how their football's gone. But Kasper Schmeichel's not really connected with the fans in the way that Joe Hart has. He's got himself injured. Vinny Sinisalo came in, probably going to see him for the rest of the season, Melly, including potentially the cup final. What did you think? Worried? I thought he did okay, decent save in the first half. Kicking was a bit shonky, but
aye, decent save in the first half. It was a difficult game. The conditions were absolutely horrendous, but it's easy to see. Well, when you look up the other side of the pitch, you go, maybe he's not so bad, because Craig Gordon still looks utterly painful.
What was he fuming about?
Oh, I don't know.
Always fuming when he lets in a goal, even though there's absolutely nothing there, and his kicking just looks so sore. And there was one that went out for a goal kick, and he sort of ran past the ball, and see him try to slow down and turn and come back in. It was sore. But Sinisalo is the complete opposite to Craig Gordon. He was moving into positions that, like, he knew where he was meant to be going, asking for the ball. There was times when Celtic were sort of playing it out from the back, but instead of playing it slightly in front of the players for them to move on to, they were playing it sort of sideways, which made Celtic go back the way. The ball had to go back into Sinisalo, and he didn't panic. He put one out for a pass Schlupp, but I can't really remember much else he'd done wrong. Keepers are always, you're never going to get 100% passing, so decent saves, and I think hopefully he'll grow into it. But if Kasper Schmeichel was out, it was muted at the start of September, maybe muted, so it was going to be September, the next international break. I wouldn't be happy going into the Champions League qualifiers with Sinisalo, but happy enough for the end of the season. I know, but
well, yeah, it's early days with Sinisalo, but one thing I'm quite impressed with is how vocal he is and how involved he is. He seems like quite a confident. So I think Brendan used the word authority after the game, talking about how he was quite impressed with that. So yeah, it's good signs. He is vocal. He's involved with his team. He's pointing. He's making demands of his defence. So I liked all that from him. Whether he's been thoroughly tested enough, I think that sterner tests will come.
Press.
Yeah, they pressed and they made a couple of decent chances, but when I think of the chances, it was really that one from the corner in the first half, and then Wilson put a header really wide from about 6 yards or something. But other than that, it's very early days, but I like what I see so far. I'm always just slightly wary of having a guy who was brought in to be backup. I suppose it's slightly different circumstances with this time around because Celtic signed such an older keeper, 38-year-old keeper. It's maybe not the usual dynamic where clubs will sign two keepers, one's like 25 and one's 19. We've signed a guy who ideally should be kind of coming up with behind Schmeichel to take his place. I know that was a stretch, that one. So what I mean is, he was signed for these purposes. Kasper Schmeichel was always going to get potentially injured or
he's lucky he signed that extension a matter of weeks ago, because had we not offered Kasper that extension and he get injured, it could have been finished.
Yeah, no. Again, as we sit here, as we record this, we're still fairly unclear on the extent of his injury. I don't know why it's taken so long. It's been about 5 days or something since he's been injured. There's no reporting on it. Hopefully that will become clearer in the next day or so. But I wouldn't like to be without him for too long, because at his age, you are looking at, if you're out for months, you could be looking at a very tricky return to action. Yeah,
there was rumours that he was out to September, which was reported in when he was on international list. We'll see how it pans out, but I think Sinisalo's all right. But I think just what you say, Melly, about you don't want to go in the Champions League with him, like, that's damning in its own right. We bought the guy, we paid him, we bought him from Aston Villa. He's played football. He's here to play, and we probably will. I don't see a situation where we'll go into the summer signing another keeper. We just have to play Vinny. Okay, I want to finish up. Neil Lennon, another man that I absolutely love. I love the guy so much. That's not a meme. I just think he's brilliant. And I was so pleased to see him get the Dunfermline job. And then he brings in Big Vic and he gets sent off in his first game. And I just thought, this is just, I can just, Neil Lennon's got a speaking of personality, Neil Lennon's got personality. He's always having a laugh and all that. And he's got a bit of a joke in him. Even Neil Lennon must have been absolutely pissed himself at that chain of events.
We were keeping an eye on it at the game, and I was like, oh, that's 2-0 here, Stephen. Then it came up, red card, but it didn't say who, and I went, imagine that was Wanyama.
I was very, very wary of all that. Oh, what a massive coup it is for Dunfermline they signed Wanyama, because I was like, look, a big name, but he is comfortably about 8 years past his peak now.
Yeah.
I looked into his sort of recent record, and he hasn't played more than about 20 games in a season. The last time he played over 20 games for Spurs was 7 or 8 years ago, and I thought, right, yes, there's big names, but is it Freddie Ljungberg? Is it Carlton Cole or something like that? It kind of is, isn't it? They've taken a guy off the couch to get a run out for 7 games in the Championship, and now he's suspended.
I don't. So was that a straight red card? So is that 2 games he misses?
No, I
It's
can't
not
give
violent.
It was a
is it?
handball, so I
Aye.
think it might just be one
So
game.
he misses the one. So he comes on for 2. He's got 7 games left. Plays 20 minutes in the first one.
He's
presumably-
woefully under fitness as
yeah,
well. eh?
presumably to get him up to speed, and then he's missing the next one. so he's going to have 5 games left. 5 games. I don't know where Dunfermline are. Their fate might be sealed by 3 games. So
Aye.
really, it's listen. If you're bringing Neil Lennon in as manager, one thing you can guarantee is he's going to look. As you said, he's going to fire up the old
Group chat.
2012 WhatsApp.
2012 WhatsApp group chat and get all the boys back together. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. If you don't want to support the podcast, you just like watching it on YouTube or listening wherever you listen, hit subscribe because that helps as well. Doesn't cost you anything. Helps us. Share it with a friend. That helps in every way possible. Thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week.